So welcome everyone to Ecopsychology Voices, an interview series with some of ecopsychology's luminaries. Hello, my name is Carol Koziel, and I'm the founder of the Canadian Ecopsychology Network, the host of this series. Linda Bazal and I co-created this program. Today, Linda's going to be in conversation with Julie Cordero-Lamb, I hope I said that right, about regenerative land practices. And I just want to first of all introduce Linda. Linda is an ecotherapist, an educator of ecopsychology, and an author. She co-edited Ecotherapy Healing with Nature in Mind with Craig Chalquist. I'd also like to, at this point in time, just publicly acknowledge all of the support and mentoring that Linda has given the Canadian Ecopsychology Network, myself, Ecopsychology Voices, and I just want to say thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. A lot of people appreciate everything that you do for our field. And with that, I'm going to turn the airwaves over to you.
Oh, thank you, Carol. That was sweet. Well, I'm really excited to be talking with Julie today. Excuse me, and I want to start by reading a little biography of her because I think you'll be amazed at some of the things that she's done, and it will help us put into perspective everything that she's going to share with us. So bear with me here. Julie Cordero-Lamb is an ethnobotanist and herbalist whose enthusiasm for plants and skill at identifying species and practicing traditional medicine ways won the trust and teachings of several prominent Chumash culture carriers before they passed. Julie also attended Michael Moore's Southwest School of Botanical Medicine in Bisbee, Arizona, as part of her fieldwork while pursuing a doctoral degree in Native American religious traditions from UC Santa Barbara. During her 5 years working in the education department at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, Julie studied every source available on cultural burning performed by her ancestors as a means to produce the abundance and high quality of food, medicine, and tool materials that made it possible for them to thrive in her homeland for upwards of 10,000 years. In her capacity as a teacher of traditional regenerative horticulture, Julie is a prominent voice in restoring indigenous burning practices to native landscapes and applying fire as a tool for food sovereignty. In her traditional educational knowledge work, TEK, she has written articles about fire TEK for News from Native California, spoken at international conferences about fire's role in bridging cultural concepts of nature, been a guest on radio shows about the dangerous impacts of suppressing indigenous fire, and was featured with the Syuxtun Plant Mentorship Collective in the documentary series Tending Nature by KCET in Los Angeles. In 1996, she co-founded the Chumash Maritime Association, which successfully revitalized Chumash canoe building, crewing, and navigating traditions. In 2016, at the behest of Chumash youth, who informed her that all the other local TEK culture carriers had passed on, she founded the Syuxtun Plant Mentorship Collective. In non-pandemic years, she travels from her organic farm in Western Washington State back home to California 8 to 10 times per year and has taught 20 collective members how to tend, gather, process, and preserve the most important Chumash foods and plant medicines. Julie emphasizes to her tech and food sovereignty apprentices the connection between our gut and soil microbiomes that both require a similar diversity of healthy flora in order to produce healthy, disease-resistant organisms, and how properly managed fire accomplishes the needed decomposition and mineral replacement of the soils in her homeland. So welcome, Julie. We are thrilled to have you here. Looking forward to learning.
Thank you. I would just like to tell everyone that my cousins wrote that biography for me because I am terrible at writing them and they went way overboard what I normally share with people. So props to my cousins for making me tell everybody all the stuff that I have done. And
Good.
I turned my video off because my, I'll see if I can turn it back on again. Yes, my internet connection rolls like fog across the land, and sometimes it's thick and sometimes it's thin. So we'll just do the best we can. But thank you very much for that introduction. I so appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Yeah,
So can I just hold forth now? Is that all right?
that's it. Go for it.
Okay. So I'm coming to you right now from Western Washington State. I live in a small town called Stanwood, right at the confluence of the North and South Forks of the Stillaguamish River. This is traditional Tulalip and Stillaguamish homeland that I live on. I've got good relations with the folks here. A lot of this is unceded territory, and I just very much want to acknowledge that in a meaningful way. My tribe that I come from is the Chumash Nation of Santa Barbara area. Our traditional homeland extends from San Luis Obispo in the north to Malibu in the south. Malibu is a Chumash word. It means the surf crashes loudly. The northern Channel Islands and inland to Bakersfield. So that's our traditional area. My family has been in the Santa Barbara area for upwards of 10,000 years. And the name that you heard Linda say a couple of times, Syuxtun, that's the original name of the village where Santa Barbara is now located. And that village name kind of shapes a lot of my talk right today. It means it forks. And it refers to my village's position on the fork of several important trade routes, one of which is where the 101 freeway is now. Another one is the 154 that heads over the mountains inland. And the rest is a place where the canoes would leave out to the northern and southern Channel Islands and up and down the coast. So it's a major, major hub of trade in Santa Barbara. But the reason why the young people in the Syuxtun Plant Mentorship Collective and I chose this name is because we recognize that at this point in time, we're at a major fork in history, more so than any of us in living memory can remember. I'm 52. I've never seen anything like the changes that have occurred during this pandemic in terms of people's, I think, real desire to reconnect not only with our people, but how do we actually make this family connection to the land be real? What are the practices that we're looking at? So today I'm going to show some slides and just kind of like, I think a lot of you, already know many of these things. So I'm going to speak as though I'm speaking to an uninformed yet interested audience, but I think many of you are probably way ahead of the game in this one. But I will start with a conversation that I had online with a parenting group that I belong to that just kind of illustrates the problems that we're dealing with people being so profoundly disconnected from the land, but still coming from scientists who recognize climate change and climate disruption as something very real. And I will talk about my wonderful collective, all of these incredible Chumash young people who come with me out to the land, to the places that we've managed to access in our traditional homeland. And I want to contextualize what you're going to see. We are a state recognized tribe. We're one of the oldest tribes in California, but we do not have federal recognition. And as such, we do not have a land base of our own. We still live in our homeland and we still take care of it. But one of the biggest problems that we face is access to natural areas. We're a little bit different from the rest of the public. We're not just going to go in there and start foraging willy-nilly. We know what we're doing in these landscapes because of the elders that I learned from. So when I show pictures of us walking on the land, these are all lands that are not reservation lands. These are owned by the county, overseen by different landscape restoration companies. There's a couple of pictures taken out at Limu, which is also known as Santa Cruz Island. We don't own that either. We don't have easy access to it. So these places are going to look like we're just like tiptoeing through the tulips with no effort at all. But what you're not seeing is all of the work that went into just being able to be trusted enough to access these places on an ongoing basis. So I'll show you some of the work that we've done that is regenerative wildlands horticulture in action. I'm not going to talk about fire as much today. I mostly want to talk about the connections between these young people and the land, and how how these practices of actually tending the sources of our food and medicine has changed them and changed a lot of us, and are helping us like kind of bridge that divide. And I think this is a really good time to be telling these stories. I recently had a conversation with an animator who I really admire. His name's Tom Moore, and he did, I don't know if any of you have seen this, he did the animated feature, The Book of the Kells, and then another one called Song of the Sea. And if you haven't seen these, oh my goodness, you need to see them. They're absolutely beautiful. But he's like looking for new ideas for an animation that would include sort of similarities between Celtic and Native American symbolism, and land ethos, and worldviews that are not extractive capitalist worldviews. And we were just chewing the fat about that. And I said, Tom, your animations always end with people rekindling their connection to their pre-Christian, pre-industrial capitalism connection to the land. But my question to you is, then what? How do you actually do that? Once you've found the psychological space to understand yourself as part of a place, as an intimate flesh and blood part of a place, how do you actually practice that? What does that look like, Tom? And he's like, I don't know. That's why I'm talking to you. So these have been really fruitful conversations, and I would like to share with you a little bit of what I share with people everywhere. So I'm going to pop my slides up on screen here. Can everybody see that yet? Can you see that? Probably not, huh? Hold on. Let me try this another way. Oops, where'd you go? Linda, can you see this?
No, I can't see it yet.
Okay, here we go.
There we go. Look.
All right.
Now we
okay,
can see
come on
it.
now. How's that?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay.
Can you
Good,
make it
very
full
good.
screen? Oh, there, great.
Us. And I always start my talks with this plant because it kind of embodies the importance of not commodifying nature and recognizing that, yes, okay, these are resources. They're incredibly important. We do use them. We do harvest them. We do gather them. But what's the difference between using a resource and having a family relationship with those areas and those species that belong there, to which we belong, in a way that can continue indefinitely? And that phrase, it will continue indefinite, our ceremonies into very many of our songs, and oftentimes said at the end of a story where we're telling young people how to take care of these places as though they're family members, because they are. I mean, we have the same affection for these species as we do our aunts and uncles, because of how they interact with us and how they teach us things in our lives in a very real sense, not simply ideological, although that's a good start. How do we do this? So I want to start this story with a handful of berries, because I think no matter where you are in the world, this is something familiar to all of us. White sage is a little more abstract, but berries, we're all there. We love berries. So this is a screenshot from the family homeschooling group that I belong to in Telegram. And this is from last August. And one of the parents came home after a very successful berry gathering trip. And this is Pacific Northwest. Everyone gathers blackberries. One goes out with their kids because you can't misidentify it. They're incredibly safe. Your main pitfalls are yellow jackets and giant spider webs when you reach in for berries. That's pretty much it. And thorns, of course. So they shared success today, and everybody said, wow, that's great. That looks wonderful. And then they said where they were. This is the best thing ever. And then one of my friends, who is a scientist I greatly respect, he's an aeronautics engineer with Boeing, he writes, you crazy people picking random stuff off random bushes in nature and eating them. Nope, 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 nope. And then another person said, oh my gosh, same. And then he said, it'd be my luck that I'd pick something poisonous and ruin my week. And then somebody else said, are you guys serious? Eating berries off bushes is amazing. And yeah, Himalayan blackberries in the Northwest are just the best. And then somebody said, I was on our way back from hiking. My friend did that. And I was all, y'all are crazy. Y'all got a pair on you made of steel. And then somebody else asked, where do you think berries come from? And then he said, I'll jump out of planes and go try and climb treacherous rock faces, but count me out on this. And let me go back to that one. And, that just blew my mind, because this particular person and I have long conversations. We form curriculum together for our kids, having to do with how do we overcome global climate disruption? Where does humanity go from here? And one of the things that I talk about a lot is that, look, this isn't just about, it is about reducing fossil fuel dependency. It is about reducing our carbon footprint. It is so much about all of these things, but how do we re-embed ourselves in the world in a way that espouses, that utilizes a worldview that comes from a very different place of relationship with land? How do we go to the root cause? How do we become so separate in the first place? So we've had these conversations together for years, and here he's telling me, but I'm not going to pick any blackberries. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board. But he's also not entirely wrong, because you do want to know what you're looking at very, very much. You definitely don't want to get plant identification wrong. In the case of blackberries, it's a little hard to do that, but in other cases, it's absolutely correct. So just to give an example, this is one of my favorite medicinal plants, Osha, Ligusticum porteri. It grows in the montane areas of the West. It likes wetter areas. And those of you who know plants can see that it's really, really similar to poison hemlock. It's in the same family, looks very similar. Sometimes poison hemlock doesn't have the telltale purple blotches on it. They smell very different, but if you're getting close enough to start squishing things and smelling things, poison hemlock's not the one you want to do that with. So as I walked into being able to talk to the young people that I'm working with, who asked me to please pass on the breadth of what I know about our materia medica and our traditional foods, gathering, harvesting, preparation, preservation. Very many of our elders. One of the first things I had to talk to them about is, look, Santa Barbara County has an absolutely absurd diversity of plants. And for every plant that is one of our allies and one of our medicines and one of our foods, there's something that looks either exactly like it or very similar that'll kill you. So I don't want you to go in being afraid. I want you to go in being respectful and humble. I want you to go in thinking, I don't know, and be comfortable saying, I don't know. Please put all of your desire for authority to the side. And that includes me, because there are so many plants in Santa Barbara County. And I know like maybe 500 or 600 of them really well. After 35 years of study, there's like another 1,500 that I don't know very well. And that's just like general categories. There's more. So I want you to be able to walk into this space just humble and understand that we're just going to be asking questions. And a lot of what we're going to be doing isn't gathering plants right away. We're going to be learning about botany and plant taxonomy from our ancestral perspective, and what birds need these things and what habitats they create and what our literal footprints do and how do we have a positive impact in this place. And we're going to take baby steps. But what we're working towards, and that what we lost during the time of the missionization of the Franciscan Padres when they came into our area in 1750, 1769. What we lost was a connection to these places that we could remember from our fathers, from our mothers, from our grandparents. And just to give you an example of what I mean by that, these pictures aren't that great, but it's a good example. If you look at the black and white line drawing where it says stave removal scar, this is a juniper tree out in the San Bernardino area in the Pinyon juniper woodlands. And the stave that's removed there is for making a bow, a particular type of sinew-backed juniper bow that's used for deer hunting. There, I can barely string them. You can put an arrow through a car with these things. So they're incredibly, incredibly powerful arrows. But this is so special, this picture, because if you look on the bottom picture, you can see a stone right in the middle. And they actually, in the line drawing, they have a little, so you can see it better, hammerstone. And then in the picture on the left, upper left, it's not a great picture, but you can kind of see where that stave scar is. So the person who removed this stave was showed this place by his father. His father was showed this place by his father. His father before that was showed this place by his father. And they only take one stave per lifetime from this spot. They wait for it to grow back. It takes, a few years for this to grow back properly, and then they'll come and take a stave from it. So as long as this tree has been big enough to have this perfect gathering spot, it's been an intergenerational, it has a memory, it has a place in the family tree, literally. I did not mean to make that pun, but it does have a place in that family's story. And so imagine your father shows you this when you're little. When you're the right age, we'll come here and we'll take your bow from here and I'll show you how to make a bow. And his father said the same thing to him. Imagine coming to that place and finding it gone just because some rich person needed a third house. I mean, that is an absolute outrage, and it's awful for the young people. It's like it's a loss that can't even really be put into words. I've tried for years. It's an abomination. So we don't need this slide. This is an example of something that's made by gathering wood from places that our families have been going for thousands and thousands of years. This is a traditional Chumash tomol. It's a redwood plank canoe. The technology for making these was very nearly lost. We were able to revitalize this practice beginning in 1996 when I moved back to Santa Barbara. And now there are about 10 or 11 tomols built entirely by the Chumash community. And every year we navigate these tomols across some pretty intense water out to the Channel Islands and have a huge gathering out there every year. It's been just an incredible flowering of our culture, and we've had to fight pretty hard to maintain this. But the wood for these beautiful canoes, traditionally it washed ashore on the island of Santa Rosa in the northern Channel Islands off the coast of Santa Barbara. The name for Santa Rosa in our language is Wheatma, which means redwood gathering place. And all of that floated on the ocean down from Northern California. So we'd get these massive logs, huge redwood logs. Can you all still hear me, Linda? Am I coming through okay? Because my screen keeps freezing up and I'm wondering if you lost me. Okay, thank you.
You're here.
Okay, very good, very good. So I wanted to show this picture because how we built this particular canoe in this picture was not by gathering wood out on Santa Rosa Island and adzing it and splitting the planks and aging them like our ancestors did. We had to go to, Home Depot and get wood like anybody else does. We had to go to Orchard Lumber. We had to get big pieces of redwood heartwood. We had to buy them because we didn't have access to this resource anymore. So we did what we needed to do to remember these traditions, but the goal has always been to go back to the relationships with the places and the plants and do it in a way that's actually that we can continue it indefinitely. If it can't be continued indefinitely, it's not a sound regenerative practice. We just keep going back to that like a thesis statement. Like, what is what we are doing right now? How does this reflect this ethos of it will continue indefinitely? But we did recover this technology, so that was really wonderful. Okay, so these are several of my apprentices from the Syuxtun Plant Mentorship Collective. We're walking through the San Marcos Foothills Preserve to go and help gather one of our favorite food plants, blue dix or Dicholostoma capitatum or wild hyacinth. It's got lots of names, but it's in the lily family. And it's one of my absolute favorite traditional foods. The little tiny cormlets, when you cook them right, taste like a cross between a potato and an artichoke heart. And with a little garlic and a little butter, oh God, so good. You can add them to soups to thicken them. You can add them like potatoes. You can dry them and make them into a very nutritious flour. And how these are gathered, the regenerative way of gathering these. Do you see how there's these little cormlets attached to the big central corm? When you dig them up, you put those little babies back in the ground. This is not something that I've seen people out foraging for these because they are very tasty and anybody can get them, but they're just digging them up and that's it. They're not putting these little cormlets back into the ground. Well, here's what happens if you do put them back on the ground. So there's the big main one right here. There's the little baby ones. You put them back in the ground. And after a while, you've got this carpet of these amazing, nutritious plants. And you can just go along with a digging stick and just very lightly dig them up and have a little kid follow behind and, collect up the little cormlets and put them back in the ground and then put the big ones in the bag. And it takes about an hour and you've got enough to feed a lot of people for quite a while. And it's very, very healthy starch. So that's just a really easy to get understanding of regenerative horticulture. It's where I start my students because it's so, it takes a few years for those fields to really pop, but the idea, they get it immediately. So they're like, oh, okay, that's cool, Aunt Julie, that's neat. And then I take them back to the house and we cook them up and they find that they have a new favorite food. And so they become very attached to this place and they want to make sure that it thrives. So that's kind of where we start. So this is a very, very drought-stressed, overgrown blue elderberry in the San Marcos Foothills Preserve. Normally what would happen in this area is that fire would clean up all of that dead stuff and make the tree so much more water efficient. In places like Northern California, where the Yurok and the Hupa have recovered quite a few of their cultural burning practices, in cooperation with municipal fire districts who have firefighters on hand. They're very careful with these things. In the places where they do cultural burning, they've found that the watersheds have improved quite a lot because the dead material isn't trying to pull so much water out of the ground. And also we have a practice of, we cut all this stuff back and then we mulch the ground around the trees with the dead material if it's not diseased. And it really creates some gorgeous water efficiency in these very dry areas. But we can't burn in the San Marcos Foothills because it's completely surrounded by beautiful mansions. And people get nervous, we're not probably never going to burn in that area, but it's even more important for us to do these traditional regenerative horticultural practices. But so for these people in the picture, this is the first time in their lives. These are Chumash people. We've been living in the same area forever, but for 2 generations, this how to do these things was very nearly lost. And one of the reasons it was lost is because the practitioners were told by the priests and the nuns at the boarding school that traditional native practices were the work of the devil. And that if they practiced, especially medicine, they were witches or brujas, and they would go to hell. And so a lot of the old people that taught me were really nervous about teaching me and would say, well, back in the day, they did that, but we don't do that because that would be, God doesn't like that. I mean, there are so many words for what that is that I can't say in polite company. But that's how these traditions get lost is, well, no, real medicine is antibiotics. Real medicine is, and I don't poo-poo Western medicine at all, but there's a gigantic part of what is healing to people's bodies that is left out of Western medicine, which is a combat-oriented way of doing medicine. I'll talk about more about that in a little bit. So this was, for these people in these pictures, this was the first time many of them had ever engaged in anything like this. So here's quite a few of the young folks in this group, and we're all holding up those straight shoots that elderberry form, and we use these for many, many purposes. So even though this was the first time many people had gone out and mitigate some of the drought stressed material and, take care of that, everybody in this picture had already made their own clapper stick. A traditional Chumash clapper stick made from elderberry is our traditional instrument. Clappers and flutes, most of which are made from this particular plant, because the center of the stem is hollow. It's just got this pithy material inside, which is pretty easy to get out. So everybody here is very excited that we've got such great Wansock material, and they already know what to do with this. Okay, so let me move on. So here we've cleaned it up quite a lot, and you can see these straight parts over here on the left. We left those there because they're not quite to the place where you could use them for Wansocks. And so I said, this is like us, our ancestors' agriculture. They see what they want to grow. They grow it in the place where it's already growing. We create the conditions for it to grow properly. We ask the tree what it needs. We sit quietly and we listen and we watch. And if there's habitat, we can only really see it if we're quiet for a while, because those animals know we're there. So let's just be quiet for like a good couple of hours. And we were able to see that there was some nesting things that we needed to leave alone. We were able to see that there was a wood rat that had a little burrow nearby. And we thought, okay, well, let's make conditions great for all of these creatures that are here. So this is the next year after our first pruning. That is a lot of elderberries. That was a lot more elderberries than that tree was capable of producing. And so I taught our people, okay, the human gathering zone is right here between just above your head and just to your waist. This is where we're going to gather. Everything above and below that is for everybody else that lives here. So the deer and the other animals that need these things. But so we'll just stick to our lane, okay? This is our lane. So here we are gathering in the human zone. This huge wall of elderberries, that's just one elderberry plant. That's just that one little bush that we came after. It's just so abundant. Okay. So it's pretty amazing for us to be able to just sit together as a family. I look at this picture and I'm just so nostalgic right now. I miss this with every fiber of my being. We can't do this until after, pretty widespread vaccinations and, herd immunity and all of that. But at our early, if any of you have ever done handwork together, like quilting bee or just something that you're doing together with your family, this is just the best. We sit and once we get into the rhythm of the work that we're doing, and once I've showed them, okay, you got to pull the stems out, and all that, people know what they're supposed to be doing. All the stories happen, and the catching up with family doings, and so on, and all that conversation, all that love, and just enjoying each other's company. These are all cousins. We've known each other since we were born. All of that goes into this medicine, and we're making elderberry syrup for people to be able to take care of themselves over the winter season, because it's a very powerful antiviral, very powerful. There's lots of scientific papers out there that show how effective this medicine is. So in the wintertime, we're taking this medicine that objectively works, lots of science papers, lots of white papers, double-blind clinical tests, mostly in Germany, because People don't test things like that in the United States. The American Medical Association doesn't really like that. But in the countries where they do this science work, you know, objectively, elderberry is really a great medicine. We know that. But for this particular group, for our particular families, we have the memory of having interacted and improved the health of this beautiful grandmother Kayas tree. And we have the memory of this wonderful gathering of people coming together and creating something with great love for our families. And when you're sick, when you've got that fever and you just feel like, oh God, I want to die, and you take that medicine, it's so much more than something that you're just family. This is the land that you're from. This is, you know, the minerals in the soil where your ancestors are literally buried. And it sounds a little dramatic, but that's the depth of our connection. Okay, I'm going to go back to that because I do want to make a quick point about this. So I do not look down on Western medicine. My father needed heart surgery. Some of my relatives need insulin. I think that Western medicine has a lot of amazing. I can't do neurosurgery on somebody. I cannot reattach your arm. What my ancestors did about ectopic pregnancy was they died. So I'm very grateful to, but what it's not great at is dealing with chronic disease. It's not great at dealing with autoimmune conditions. And my friends who are physicians, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, epidemiologists, I've had to have lots and lots of connections in the medical community to do what I do properly. They all tell me these are the weaknesses of Western medicine: is chronic disease. And mental illness is really, really hard. What we have, the gold standard for mental illness in our current practice is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and that they're not always the best. So what we've talked about over the years is how even just the name allopathic medicine, that's what modern Western medicine is called. Allo means against, pathic means disease. Allopathic means against disease. That is a combat-oriented way of looking at illness. And Western medicine is awesome at combating. If you're wounded, if you've got, if you need surgery, Western medicine is heroic. But if what's going on with you is that you've been traumatized, or you've been eating the food that's available to you in a food desert in the middle of an urban area, and the stresses that are on you are beyond what most people can handle, what you don't need is something coming in and combating. What you need is something that's coming in from the ground and nurturing the organism. So our way of doing medicine is regenerative. It looks at the soil, and it looks at the human gut, and it looks at the human heart as needing nurturing and richness and connection and actual hands-on love with knowledge. And our word for this practice is atoshwan, and it means to heal, and it means to dream, and it means to poison. It means all of those things. The wisdom and the intent that you bring to this practice is you'll create healing, you'll create visioning, or you'll poison. So it's not a submission domination way of seeing power. It's not a combat-oriented way of seeing power. It's a systems-based understanding of power. It's difficult to describe in English because the Chumash language is a verb-based language. Everything's matter in motion. There's very few objects. You can't actually own something because there's no things. So we could talk all day about that. So I'm just going to move on to the rest of this. But we're dealing with not just, is this herb better than this drug? That's not what we're talking about. That's a false binary. We're talking about a completely different way of doing medicine that's based on understanding the human organism and the human heart as being in connection with all of life. So a little bit different. So I'm going to go through this part kind of quickly, but I like talking about it. So this is Syuxtun, which is holly leaf cherry, Prunus ilicifolia. It's one of those food plants that's like considered a huge delicacy. by our ancestors, but that we were really scared to try again, because the part that our ancestors prepared was not the very thin fruit on the outside of the very fat pit, but the inner kernel. And the inner kernel, well, it smells really good. It smells like marzipan. It smells like bitter almond. Can you guess why? Because it's full of cyanide. And so you know what you're doing with this one, or you'll kill people. So here's the pit, dried and cleaned. And then we crack those open and we use the shells of the green Achtayukas fruits. We burn them into a white ash that acts like a lime. And we use that white ash in soaking and boiling the inner kernels. Here's a bunch of inner kernels right here. Here's my mom. Here's a bunch of my cousins. The kitchen smelled so good. It smelled like marzipan, but it's because it was very deadly toxic. And then you roast them, and then you have your scientist cousin who has a degree in phylogenetics do all the cyanide assaying so we can make sure we're doing this correctly based on an old memory of what one of my elders told me. We weren't going to even mess around with this the first time until we really knew what we were doing. And I held off on bringing this food back into our families just out of fear. I didn't want to hurt anybody. And my cousin Alicia says, well, we could just buy a cyanide testing kit. I'll do it. I'm good at this stuff. And I was like, oh, right. Technology. Okay. All right. We'll do what we need to do. So very much like with the Tomo, where we had to go and buy planks from the hardware store, okay, so the first time we bring back this traditional food, we'll use the resources that we need to use to bring the practice back safely and not hurt anybody. So let's see, I think, did I screw this up? This seems to be a slide missing. Anyway, we'll go on. So we did that and we brought it back, and it's very, very tasty. And the traditional way to do it is to take those kernels and leach them until they test 0 cyanide levels, and then you cook them like frijoles, look like frijoles, and you sweeten it a little bit with some maple syrup or some honey, and then you roll little balls of that paste in toasted chia seeds, and you serve them as little balls at a feast. And it's just, they're so good. And when we showed up with these little balls of Achtayukas, some of our very elderly elders could not believe it. They hadn't had it since they were tiny. We didn't tell them. We wanted it to be a surprise. And one of my aunties was like, "You're not going to kill me with this, are you?" I'm like, "Nope, there's no cyanide in it at all." And she was so happy, she cried. She's like, "I didn't think anybody would bring this back. I didn't know how to do it. Where did you learn?" And I talked about the elders that had taught me these little bits and pieces, but that how we, my very smart cousin Alicia thought about using a cyanide testing kit. So, but now we don't need that. Now we know how many leaches it takes. We know exactly how to use the ash from those shells. We can now enter back into our relationship with this plant with confidence and safety. And that's very meaningful to us. Oops, hold on. So back to the discussion with the parents in the group. This is me dropping in saying, so anyway, blackberries, they're in the rose family. This is one of those things you should learn about, Mr. Scientist guy who works for Boeing. Look up the rose family. Look up the Ericaceae family with blueberries and cranberries. You know what else is in the rose family? Apples, pears, strawberries, raspberries, marionberries, blackberries, and lots of other. Yeah, so be careful out there picking those scary, scary apples. And he actually said, I don't pick those either, unless it's in like an apple orchard purposely planted and harvested for years. And I was just like, but you're so concerned about the damage that we're doing in the world and the changes that we're creating to the climate that's causing potential catastrophes. So I said, I'm going to posit this: people being removed from the land to the extent that they have no intimacy with it is causing problems with our culture, big, extremely dangerous problems, global climate change problems. This hedge between people and nature, ideological or otherwise, is the root cause. Monetizing the sources of life is the root cause. And so other parents were like, yeah, hello, what she just said. And we're really chiming in and asking, what they could do. So this is a picture again, back with this chias tree, me and a bunch of my cousins. Okay, so this picture was taken 5 days ago in the San Marcos foothills. You can see this tree is very happy, just starting to bloom. That's the little girl of one of my apprentices standing out there. And the context for this picture 5 days ago is difficult. We knew that some of the land at the San Marcos Foothills Preserve was slated for development, and we chose to really nurture the parts that we knew weren't slated for development. But as the land developer started having more and more problems with developing that part of the foothills, it started to look like perhaps it wouldn't be developed, and we started to talk about raising the funds to buy that land from him. You know, 20 or $20 million, because it's Santa Barbara area, very expensive land there. We did not succeed quite yet in raising that much money. We were still working on it. But the developer, after saying that the project was, not going to happen, pulled some strings with who knows who. I don't know how they do these kinds of things. I don't pretend to be involved in the backroom stuff that happens in Santa Barbara, but Santa Barbara is a place where the billionaires live. It's where the absolute upper crust of the 1% lives. It's, that's where you go to live when Beverly Hills gets to be a little too downscale. And we live there with all of these billionaires, and we're just the indigenous people of the place. We don't have a lot of money. We don't have any land base of our own. We have these places that we've gained access to that our ancestors carefully tended for thousands of years. About 15 feet from this tree, there's a very small seasonal stream. And right alongside that stream, the soil has deep remains of cooking ash. So you can walk around and see pieces of clam shell, pieces of abalone shell, chunks of charred wood, and just lots and lots of that telltale gray, ashy soil that shows a midden site where people came, my ancestors came and cooked and ate and gathered and stayed. This isn't a village site right here, but it's definitely a place that's been important to my people for a very, very, very long time. As long as it's been there, we've been coming to this place. Well, the bulldozers showed up about 5 days ago, and these young people, okay, they're upset's not quite the right word. Over the last 6 years since we've been coming into this place, and I've been teaching about how do you place yourself into the seasonal round of a place? How do you go in when the spring shoots are there? Which spring shoots? Which spring flowers? How to gather them properly so that the plants can be very abundant? How do you place yourself in a regenerative way into an ecosystem over the months, over the seasons, and do it again and again? Keep returning, keep your feedback loop small. What does that mean? Well, for these young people, it always happens about the third or fourth year that they come back into a place that they've been diligently caring for and are just like, oh my God, look at this abundance. This is crazy. I did this. Oh, I belong here. You can see that thing happen in their minds, like, oh, I'm not bad for the land. Humans aren't inherently bad for a place. We can use these resources and make them more abundant. Oh, this is a thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's a thing. Our ancestors built our entire economies around this thing. This thing is embedded in our stories and our songs when we say it will continue indefinitely. This is what they meant. This is the practice of that idea, not just the idea. This is how you do it with your hands. And that seems like such a simple thing for everybody that likes to prune apple trees. I mean, there's lots of gardeners in this group. You know what I'm talking about. But when it's your place, and you have been separated from that place by violence, and you've been disenfranchised of having any say over how your homeland is built on. These places, these young people come here to pray. They when they're having a hard time, especially during the pandemic, they would come to this tree and sit socially distanced with their masks on and just sing so that they could survive this stuff that they're going through right now. The indigenous communities have lost so many people to COVID, but in our families, the ones that have the elderberry syrup, the ones that have the yerba santa, the ones that made sure to do the seasonal rounds in a regenerative way and bring this medicine to our families, I can't say that we have a cure for COVID. I would never claim that. That's crazy. But the people who are taking these medicines and caring for their bodies and doing it right at the onset of illness, they're doing really well. There's no long COVID. And this is even the elders in our family. Again, I'm not going to say we have a cure for COVID. That's absolutely nuts. These people started improving their health 3 or 4 years ago as we started bringing our traditional foods back in. This wasn't just a heroic medicine. Oh gosh, you have COVID, take some elderberry, you'll get all better. That's not what I'm talking about. We have been caring for our biome, our soil and our gut and our relationships for the last 4 or 5 years. And it has truly changed everything for these young people and their families. So in this small circle, we're doing okay so far. You know, I don't want to jinx it. So this was 4 days ago. These 2 young women are 2 of my apprentices. This is at the entrance to the San Marcos Foothills Preserve, a place also known as the Bridge to Nowhere. And it's a funny little road, and it's been there for a while. People just go up there and park and enjoy the view. And they've parked themselves in front of the bulldozers. You can't see the bulldozers in this picture. You can't see all the police in this picture. But right after this picture was taken, they were both arrested for standing there. They were both taken to the Santa Barbara jail. And the one on the left was forcibly searched. She was 100 pounds soaking wet. She was thrown down on the ground by 4 giant police officers and anything illegal. They were released the next day because they hadn't done anything illegal. But we know that if we're going to protect our land, if we're going to protect the places that actually mean something, this is what's required. And everybody who's in the indigenous community, you don't know what it's like to be indigenous until you've been cavity searched by the police for protecting land and water, which is the heritage of everyone, not just us. This kind of development, these are luxury houses that are going in. These are going to be not the first homes of people, not family homes for folks, not needed housing in Santa Barbara County, but 3rd or 4th houses for very wealthy people. They don't need this. This is the last section of oak, savanna, perennial bunchgrass woodlands in Santa Barbara County. This is it. We don't have any more oak woodland savanna in Santa Barbara County. These young women are protecting this ecosystem for everyone who lives there. But for them, for these young people, they belong here. This is their place. We don't own it, but it's theirs. And that kind of connection, that kind of healing that's happened in our families, this is the flip side of that. So people often ask me, what can we do besides, land acknowledgements? What do we do besides say, this is the land of the Anishinaabe people. This is the land of the Makah Indians. I want to acknowledge this land. This right here, standing up and making your voices heard, especially people who have the privilege to be heard more loudly than, indigenous people usually are. That's all part of regenerative horticulture, regenerative practices, is making sure that these places don't get destroyed. This kind of thing, in my opinion, I'm going to just go off for a second. This should be criminal, doing this kind of thing in a landscape like that. It's so precious. It's never going to come back after they bulldoze it and build houses on it. It's not going to be what it was. And it needs to, we're just now starting to be able to really make this place pop. And thankfully our elderberry tree is safe, but all the places that we've been doing all of the work with our edible bulbs was just starting to really pop and come back. And It's gone now. They bulldozed it yesterday. So yeah, anyway, that's how I would like to end this talk. Not on a super upbeat note, but our worldviews and how we imagine ourselves in the world, how we trying to move away from combat-oriented ideas of monetizing, commodifying nature that is the hallmark of extractive capitalist economy. You know, that's the key to mitigating global climate change and getting away from fossil fuels and, you know, using less carbon emitting technologies. It's true, technology is really important in this fight, but it's the underlying worldview. We talk a lot about, this is the last thing I want to say. We talk a lot about the importance of not culturally appropriating our ideas and our songs and our stuff and our plants. But this idea of embedding yourselves in a landscape in a regenerative way, my family wants you to appropriate this idea. Please culturally appropriate this idea. And the idea that women are natural leaders very often. This is not, you know, if you tried to tell these young women here that they should stay home and be subservient and quiet, they would laugh their fool heads off. Our tribe and many, many other peoples in the world, we're matrilineal people. The women are natural leaders. We have authority already. Nobody has to give it to us. We just have that. This is all part of a regenerative system of interacting with land as a revered family member that imparts wisdom to us. Everything that I'm saying to you right now is what my family has learned from the plants, from the landscapes. We've learned how to behave this way because we've got these elders teaching us. They're just green and grow flowers, but they're our elders. So thank you very much for listening to me today. I don't think I have another slide after this. Nope, that's it. So I'm gonna stop this share.